Here to talk about how to load Django settings from environmental variables with one magical line of code. The package that I'll be discussing is called DjEnv. It's not officially approved by Shrek, but if he knew Python, I bet he'd give it a big thumbs up. This presentation will include the following: a code walkthrough, this magical line I referenced, in a helpful comparison table. And this is all the code. As you can tell, it's a very small package, but it's got some nifty stuff. The first line imports JSON. DjEnv uses JSON as a format for serializing the more complicated settings, like database connections and logging configuration. The second line imports OS. We will use this package to access the operating system's environmental variables. We import re. We will use this library to create a regular expression to find relevant environmental variables. Here we import the open source package called Simple-Env. Simple-Env is a library that helps us read and convert environmental variables to their appropriate primitives. For example, let's say we are running Python 3 and have set the environmental variable Django debug to false. In the standard way, we grab the environmental variable using the OS library. However, because all environmental variables are strings by default, we run into some trouble. Using the magical way, debug is correctly set as the Boolean false. In this next line, we iterate through all the environmental variables that are available. Now, we ignore the variable named Django settings module, as this is a variable that is already used by Django and predates DjEnv. We only want variables that start with Django and are all caps. So on this line, we create a regular expression and test for that. We want to make sure that we are not accidentally touching any environmental variables that are used by other applications. This line loads the environmental variables using the Simple-Env library and automatically casts them. If your environmental variable is a JSON string, it will still be a string at this point. This line is really just to catch those mistakes where you might have an accidental space at the end of your environmental variable. Happens to all of us. What this is doing is it's saying that if our environmental variable looks like it's in JSON format, just assume it's JSON, parse it, and convert it into a Python object. So we can set really complicated Django settings using this JSON format. On this next line, we call globals. What is globals? Globals is a dictionary representing the current global symbol table. That's from the Python documentation. In other words, it allows you to dynamically set variables. You don't need to know what the names of your variables are going to be ahead of time. You don't have to write that into your code. You can be totally dynamic. This step we are removing that Django underscore because the Django setting isn't called Django databases, because that would be redundant. We know we are using Django. So it sets the variable name to just databases, or whatever that Django setting is called. We are almost done. We now want to delete all these incidental variables that we created to make sure we're not accidentally importing them later. We just took a look behind the scenes at how the DjEnv source code works. Now onto this magical line I keep talking about. This is our settings.py file, and at the bottom you see we've placed from DjEnv settings import all. This line automatically imports our settings directly from our environmental variables. Here's a table to help decide when to use DjEnv versus something else. Thank you.